getting fined. So is the hope here that this policy will boost the number of vaccinated people in New York City and convince people who aren't vaccinated that they need to get vaccinated? That is absolutely the hope. Look, vaccination rates remain low, particularly among people of color, in immigrant communities. And the message being sent here is very clear. If you don't get vaccinated, you don't get to participate in the city's social life.
So give us the details about how this policy will actually be enforced. Has the mayor's office talked about that?
It's a question that I have been hearing quite a bit about from workers in the hospitality industry. On the one hand, everyone I've spoken to is relieved at this measure, but there's also a concern about who is expected to enforce this. Technically, it's New York City, but on the ground, are we asking folks who make less than minimum wage in some cases to be the enforcers? Because that's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. And so how have businesses reacted to this news?
I would say businesses have responded quite positively. We've heard from fitness clubs and the hospitality industry endorsing this. I think there's a sense, both from businesses and New Yorkers at large, that no one wants to go back to 2020. It was devastating on so many levels, not least of all financially. And so I think the sense is, if this mandate helps avoid that, let's go ahead and do it. And so I guess the question is, this is happening in New York City, will other cities follow at some point, Jasmine? Well, in his press conference, de Blasio said, New York City is often the city that sets the tone for other cities in the country. As the Delta variant rises nationwide, I think we might see more of this, yes. And New Yorkers generally, are they willing to follow along here? I would say most New Yorkers will do whatever it takes to not have a repeat of 2020. You definitely have pockets where we've seen resistance. We've heard from a councilman in Staten Island who said this was discriminatory and this is creating a second class of citizens. But for the most part, the feeling is that New York City has already been through so much. Let's not revert back to 2020. That's NPR national correspondent Jasmine Garsd in New York. Jasmine, thank you. Thank you so much.
The Biden administration has found a way to continue a federal ban on evictions during the pandemic, at least for now. The CDC's new moratorium on evictions announced yesterday came just a few days after the expiration of the previous one. The new extension is a bit more targeted, but it is also more likely to face legal challenges. Joining us now is NPR White House correspondent Asma Khalid. Asma, welcome.
All right, thanks, Peter. Glad to be with you all.
Glad to have you. Now, this is an interesting turn of events because last week, with the moratorium about to expire, the president was calling on Congress to extend it, but there wasn't really any time to do that. So how did we get to yesterday when he's now taking the issue back into his own hands?
Well, I will say, Peter, it's been a bit of a convoluted story, and one to me that stands out because this White House has been masterful at messaging. And normally when there's a new policy that comes out, they have a long, involved rollout. This stood out because it did not happen in that regard, right? As you mentioned, there was this national eviction moratorium. It lapsed. It expired on Saturday at midnight. And the Biden administration that this was the purview of Congress.
Moratorium is a fancy word for block, I have come to find. Why can't they just use the word block?
That the president, the Centers for Disease Control,
it's like, maybe people would understand it a little bit more if they were to use the people's language instead of politicalese or legalese or whatever.
And so, we were told that they kind of tripled, quadruple checked
moratorium.
And did not feel that this was under the purview of the president.
Moratorium.
Unilaterally, and then of course we saw the announcement yesterday. With
I
the
consider
CDC
myself a
saying
linguist.
that it had put out this more targeted, limited eviction.
This word escapes me.
So fill in some of the details.
We don't use any variant of
What we will
moratorium
go through October 3rd
in
is a
everyday
2-month,
speech.
essentially extension. I shouldn't say extension, because it is more targeted. What we've been told is that this will specifically focus on places that have been
Okay, I
hit
have to turn
by
down
the
the
rise of
frequencies.
The Delta variant. As of now, this does affect places that are essentially about where 90% of the U.S. population lives. And, you know, the reason the administration is doing this is kind of twofold. One is they said that they felt there was this moral imperative to act. But secondly, because they feel specifically that scientific evidence has shown that people who are at risk of being evicted are also at a higher risk of, you know, contracting the Delta variant because there are lower vaccination rates in those areas.
Oh yeah, you can't make them homeless because then they'll get freaking sick or something. I don't know. I think it's like
What do you think about that?
if mass amounts of people become homeless,
Well, look, you know, as you mentioned, the president
they're going to blame the
acknowledged
government.
that whatever sort of eviction moratorium would be in place, would
And they
likely
don't want
face a
that
challenge
because
from
they
the
need the
Supreme
people's
Court.
support
And this is something
in order
that,
to
you know,
support
even
their
opponents of putting this forth,
continued
someone like Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush, who has been one of the most vocal advocates
fascist
in Congress
takeover.
for doing something to extend this eviction moratorium. You know, she was asked on NPR earlier this week and also said that it, you know, likely this would happen. But the reason she wanted action was because they felt like even if the Supreme Court acts and strikes this down, it might essentially offer tenants, you know, renters, and
It's raining a lot.
for them to sort out what to do.
It's raining so much.
$1 billion of emergency rental assistance that Congress has put out there, and a lot of that money just hasn't been used by both renters or landlords. That's a long story. I mean, basically, there have been hiccups in doling out that money, and this 2-month extension, they feel
So
might
much I
allow
can't
for
even
renters
think.
to be able to access
There's
some of that money.
stuff I wanted to talk about
when you mentioned,
that I
Cori
can't
Bush
talk
there,
about
I'm
because
thinking
it's
about
raining so
President
much.
Biden's political choices as he weighs either letting the moratorium end or, you know, risking this extension that could very easily be challenged and perhaps overturned. I mean, what do you think thinking about here politically?
You know, it's difficult, I think, for the president right now to navigate this climate where, you know, as you mentioned, it is likely to be struck down. His case suggested by the Supreme Court. And this goes back, we should point out, to the fact that this actual eviction ban, the prior federal moratorium on evictions, did actually go up to the Supreme Court. And in June, essentially, you know, it was upheld. But Justice Kavanaugh said that, you know, essentially it didn't have, in his view, the legal standing once it was going to expire July 31st.
Baka baka
That being said, there
she.
was a lot of progressive activism
Baka sheep.
and frustration that the White House was not doing something to help people who could essentially be forced out of their homes if that eviction moratorium was ending.
And just briefly, you mentioned some of that money, the COVID relief money that had been out there, that is out there, unused for people who are at risk of eviction. What has the administration been doing, or what has it been doing to make that money available?
You know, so there is about $26 billion in rental relief that was allocated by the federal government. Very little percentage of that money has actually made it out to people. The Biden White House has said they are asking agencies to look into why there have been hiccups in distributing that.
Hiccup.
Alice Holland, NPR White House correspondent. Thanks as always.
My pleasure.
You're welcome.
You're listening to Here Now.
As COVID cases spike, some businesses want customers to show proof of vaccination.
We still ask people who aren't
It's
vaccinated.
nothing but fucking COVID shit on NPR.
Some people are
I
pushing
swear to
back.
God, it's
Why
like
should we have to share that information?
that's all they talk about. That and maybe the little Tokyo
How that
Olympics
conflict is unfolding in
and
Michigan this afternoon on
environmental
Consider
stuff.
from
Like,
NPR News.
it's like their religion. You know? It's like
calling for a moratorium on coronavirus vaccine booster shots. Who says vaccine doses are more needed in other countries with low vaccination rates, and that there's still not clear evidence that a booster shot was effective. Meantime, the WHO is reporting another rise in weekly COVID infections, with more than 4 million cases confirmed worldwide over the last week.
Man, it's
That's
raining
down
a
by
lot.
8%, and more than 130 countries have now reported cases of the Delta variant. Provincial officials in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, are accusing both sides of ignoring civilian casualties in fighting for the provincial capital. That's after U.S. and Afghan airstrikes on Taliban positions in the city overnight. Taliban controls 9 of 10 city districts, and authorities have not said whether any territory was retaken overnight.
Everywhere I look, there's
Figure it
something that shouldn't get wet that's getting wet. Because this fucking roof is very leaky. It's very rainy.
Here's Dana Hill.
I'm tired of it, man. I'm just tired
Museum
of it.
Studies, the artwork of Richard Hype, is a comprehensive solo exhibition featuring over 60 works
Stop
in a variety of
raining.
media on display now
Oh my
at
God,
University Gallery
stop
through
raining.
August 28th with the closing
I'm
reception
tired of
on
it.
Friday, August 20th at 5 p.m.
Yep,
More
I mean, the
information
first
at
3 months of
arts.ufl.edu.
summer was okay.
The Ocala Symphony
We need
Orchestra has
rain.
announced the
It makes
schedule
plants
for its
grow.
upcoming season, which will
That's
kick
what
off
plants
the weekend
crave.
of November 20th
But,
with a program called
damn it,
Variations on Opening
like,
Night, featuring performances
there's a
of
certain
Elgar's Enigma
psychological
Variations
break
and
when it
Rachmaninoff's
rains this
Rhapsody
much.
on a theme
Like,
of Paganini
I just
for
want to
soloist
be
jazz and
inside
More information on the
a
season is available
freaking
at
building that doesn't get wet.
More information about the arts is available
My
at
tent's flooded.
WUFT.org.
Voice of the Arts
It doesn't
is reported by
rain
UF Health.
inside
Recently
the
named
tent, but
number
the
one
rain
in
comes
Florida
up
by
from
US News
below.
and World Report. UF Health Shams Children's Hospital is nationally ranked in 8 pediatric specialties. Learn more at ufhealth.org/pediatrics. Funding for Hera now comes from WBUR Boston and Aspiration, a digital banking alternative designed for people who care about the environment. Customers can plant a tree with every swipe of their debit card to offset their carbon footprint. Aspiration.com/green. It's here and now. The U.S. women's basketball team continues a 54-game winning streak at the Tokyo Olympics. After a commanding
See?
victory
Tokyo
over
Olympics.
Australia in
That's
today's
all they talk
quarterfinal,
about.
the team is
There's-
aiming for an unprecedented
Fortunately,
seventh
I've been
straight
flipping
gold medal.
through the
Meanwhile,
radio
Japan
programs,
won
and
yet
there
another
is
gold medal in skateboarding. The sport
there
is making its
are
Olympic
voices of
debut this
opposition.
year.
However,
For
they're
more from
always
Tokyo,
on
we're
Christian
joined by
radios.
NPR's Mandalit Del Barco. Hello. Hello.
It-
Thank you.